Okay, I think we'll get started. So good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much to our audience members who are watching us virtually, and thank you to our wonderful panelists this afternoon. It's really an honor and a pleasure to have the opportunity to introduce everyone to you all. The title of this session is Social, Economic, and Physical Resilience Academic Research Partnerships. If this does not sound right and you're in the wrong session, you still do have an opportunity to transfer to another room. But we hope that you really do stay at this session for some wonderful conversations. I'd like to begin introductions at this time. First, I'd like to introduce Dr. Erin Kobetz. Dr. Kobetz is my partner in crime, and she's a public health scientist by training and currently a professor of medicine at the University of Miami, where she also serves as Associate Director of Population Science and Cancer Disparities at the university's Sylvester Comprehensive Cancer Center. She also serves as Vice Provost for Research. And in addition to her many administrative roles, Dr. Kobetz also has a very active research program focusing on developing and translating community-based approaches for cancer prevention, really with a focus on underrepresented populations. Next, I'd like to introduce Dr. Carl Watson, who is a trained condensed matter physicist and currently serves as Dean of the Faculty of Pure and Applied Sciences at the University of the Bahamas, with responsibility for the natural sciences, engineering and technology, nursing and allied health, pharmacy, and architecture. He also leads the University of the Bahamas Sustainability Research and Teaching Agenda. Next, Dr. Myriam Moise is a Fulbright Scholar and Associate Professor of English and Gender Studies at Université des Antilles in Martinique. Get to practice my French a little bit. Since 2018, she's also the Secretary General of the Universities Caribbean, the recently rebranded Organization of Caribbean Universities and Research Institutes. Beatriz Martins Carneiro holds a master's degree in comparative law from my alma mater, the University of Florida, and a master's degree in environmental law from l'Université de Paris, Panthéon and la Sorbonne in Paris. She's also the regional coordinator of UNEP's Initiative Global Opportunities for Sustainment Development Goals in Latin America and Caribbean, which aim to accelerate regional solutions for inclusive green economies and sustainable consumption and production. Last but not least is Alice Horvath, Dr. Alice Horvath, Professor and Dean of Faculty of Environmental and Urban Change in York University in Toronto, Canada. She earned her PhD in geography from Clark University in 2003. She is focused on enhancing experiential education, research excellence, and international partnerships in the realm of environmental and urban change. Thank you all so much. We have an incredibly distinguished panel today, and looking very much to your insights and your wisdoms this afternoon. Going to refer to everyone by first name, if that's okay with everyone. And I'll ask the first question, and Erin, you're gonna get the first one. So how can team science and scholarship advance real progress when addressing a complicated issue like coastal resilience?
So I get first, and I get a tough question. Way to set me up. So I think complex problems like resilience necessitate multifactorial solutions and interdisciplinary science and scholarship that bring people together from diverse disciplinary backgrounds and epistemologies and methodologies in order to advance a common good. I don't know how you address resilience from the lens of one disciplinary orientation, because resilience in and of itself is such a complicated construct. And I believe very strongly that we are stronger together. I think you know, William, my own research as part of the team of scientists that I engage are community stakeholders. And I want to call attention to the role that community stakeholders should have in team science endeavors to address these large societal issues like resilience. I feel like I have a certain academic expertise that's worthy, but my expertise doesn't always resonate with the priorities and perspectives of the stakeholders who ultimately our research aims to translate to to improve outcomes and to increase something like resilience. And so, curious to hear from some of the other panel members about the work that they do, engaging community stakeholders to ensure that when we come up with research questions and team science and scholarship, that it appropriately resonates with local priorities and ultimately can be disseminated back to those same communities for sustainable impact and social change.
Thank you, Erin. And you touched on, actually, it's a perfect seg to the next question. And, you raised the issue of partnerships. And so this next question is for Myriam. So Myriam, how important are strategic partnerships and collaborations for such a culturally and linguistically diverse region, such as the Caribbean?
Thank you very much for this question. And in fact, I definitely agree with what Erin just said, because in fact, at Universities Caribbean, we strive to work within a transdisciplinary and translingual perspectives. Representing the diversity of the Caribbean region is not easy, but building resilience really means building capacity for our members to be able to face the different problems of the regions. And being resilient means, in the Caribbean, being resilient in a vulnerable region with a number of issues that have become priority development issues for the region, whether it is climate change or chronic diseases, COVID-19. All of these issues are common issues that we have to face together. So at Universities Caribbean, universities of the region gather their forces, indeed, because we believe that together we are stronger. So we gather our forces to face these problems together and to build bridges between the universities and their societies, the universities and stakeholders, the universities and industries. And of course, community engagement is fundamental in finding solutions to these issues. So building resilience is part of our One Caribbean Solutions strategies that we build in our organization and across our membership.
Thank you, Myriam. And you said something that I think is really important in terms of building the infrastructure and training. And so in that regard, I want to ask a couple of you, and Carlton, if you can start, and then others, feel free to chime in. Are there any particular initiatives that your university, in this case, the University of Bahamas, has engaged to better prepare the workforce in sustainability? And also, if you can speak a little bit about some of the challenges that you have had to overcome along the way. So I'm interested in hearing from you and then from someone else who also wants to chime in.
Okay, I'll try and be brief. Thank you for that question. And I really, the answers and responses by Erin and Myriam really resonate with, what is happening at the University of Bahamas. As you may know, we recently transitioned less than 5 years ago from a primarily teaching institution to a more research focus as a national university. We recognize in the face of tremendous challenges of climate change, urbanism, immigration, migration, and culture that we really have to step up to the plate and to provide solutions, innovations, and to be an institution that serves the need of the country in terms of social progress and economic development. So to that point, speaking about community, as you know, the Bahamas is an archipelago with a high concentration in New Providence, and we have, small communities throughout the archipelago. One of the things we realize is important, as was said by Erin and Myriam, was this need for interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary research. And to add to that, we also want to ensure that it's not just interdisciplinary, but it's really captures in the most authentic and accurate way the needs of those communities, and we are able to position ourselves so that we can engage in long-term solutions, recognizing that we are, as you know, as stated, it's a race against time. So one of the things that we will be rolling out is a set of field stations throughout the archipelago that will add to the infrastructure and really minimize the logistics of moving students. We want to be able to move students, our international partners, and have them to really be immersed in those communities and to reimagine what a field station or a community station, a community hub can look like. As you may know, we have the Jure Center in San Salvador, one of our islands. We want to look at other alternative kinds of arrangements that really put students and researchers and international researchers in close contact with the community, learning from the community, learning with the community, informing, addressing problems. So this is something that we're excited about. And we think in this way, you know, a lot of the solutions depend on nuances. And sometimes if you look at, for example, the Bahamas is just one country, and you miss the nuances from what, you know, is happening in Exuma or Eleuthera or Abaco, sometimes you may not arrive at the best solutions. But being in those communities, talking with the elders, talking with community leaders, talking with school children, the health professionals, we will then I think we can arrive at very interesting solutions. And so that is something that we are really interested in. I will, if I may indulge, I'll defer the other question because I think I've spoken a bit too long. I think we can come back about the challenges. And
perfect. So we'll come back to you about the challenges.
I'm co-moderating, if you don't mind.
That's perfect, Carlton. I appreciate it. And for those of you who are not part of the panelists, we have a chat. And, you know, I just got a chat from Alice that she could chime in. And Alice, I was hoping for that because when I introduced you, you have so much expertise in experiential learning. And certainly I was going to ask sort of what is the role of experiential learning, you know, in training the future workforce. So I'm glad that you volunteered. Yeah. Because you may have gotten called either way. So please.
I was anticipating, I saw the synergies and I was so inspired by Carlton's thoughtful and really aspirational answer that I wanted to jump on board. So thank you, Carlton, for those insights from your university and my university, York University in Toronto, Canada. We're also thinking about how do we form and empower career-ready graduates, right, for this workforce that needs to understand sustainability and justice and, of course, resilience and what that means, not just in understanding the issues, but thinking about the actions that need to be taken to address the issues that are arising. And what I'm seeing at our campus is this incredible power of experiential education. And I think when you were talking, Carlton, about the labs, these station where people can engage with the community and kind of really roll up their sleeves and understand the issues in a particular context. That's what we've been embracing at York. We're looking at experiential education and like the power of hands-on learning and those aha moments. And it always strikes me how inspirational that is for our students. So many students say to me, wow, we just went to the university's woodlot and we learned how to identify tree species. And then we saw an invasive species and the theories that we learned in the classroom came alive on the landscape. We've seen this with, we have an alternative campus tour where we bring students through the territories on which York University sits, which is a territory that's been linked with the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Huron-Wendat, the Anishinaabe Nation, and we help people understand the layers of historical and cultural context that us settlers are now situated on. And so these aha moments are incredibly powerful. And so we've been thinking about our campus now as a living lab, where we have, for example, we have a community garden. And that is where we teach. It's a community garden, so we have folks from around the neighborhoods around our university. They come into this space. We're doing research there on food production, food security, community relationships, and people grow food together. And it's this brilliant space of recognizing what it is to be in a context, connecting with community members, bringing together those biophysical scientists with the social theorists, with artists who are there trying to experience that context and trying to generate ideas. So it's that community engagement, interdisciplinarity, and the hands-on learning piece that brings the knowledge and the skills together and is setting up students for careers. I could go on, I'll stop there.
No, I think that's so interesting. You talk about the community garden, and I can see how, an architect, a public health scientist, social scientists can all train students in their respective areas and across disciplines with something like this. You mentioned something, Alice, and I want to go next to Beatriz because she's the only one I haven't called on yet. But you mentioned something about, making sure that we have a career-ready workforce. And our president always talks about the importance of training our graduate students in having a T-shaped education. And our provost has extended that to calling it the I, right? I education. And so, with the T, and I'll stick with the T just for this conversation, the horizontal part of the T is the competencies that cut across different disciplines and skills. And the vertical part of the T is the content area expertise where we're training students. So and this is for everyone really, if you had to think about, what are one or two skills or competencies that's important for the future workforce to have, that's sort of as part of this horizontal T, what would that be? In business, our business students would answer leadership. And so, if they don't have leadership, they're going to be at a disadvantage when they go out in the real world. How about, what do you think in this arena, in this space?
Relationship building.
Okay. Yeah, I figured that one would come up.
And also, I think an appreciation to communicate across disciplinary boundaries, and also with people who may not have formal education but have necessary expertise to advance a shared agenda. I think that's really, for me, those are really, really important. And I think that relationship building is at the heart of how we are successful professionally, interpersonally. I mean, I'm curious to hear what everyone else has to say, because those are the two that come to the top of my mind, but I'm certain that there are others that they're thinking of that I haven't thought of yet.
But
Thank you, Erin. Carlton, I'm laughing because if I would have chosen two, those are the two that I would have said. I'm so surprised. Erin,
and that's because we're really each other's better half. I mean, we spend all of our time together, and it's very reassuring that we can complete each other's sentences. You complete
actually, that's so touching. Actually, those were the things that I was going to say too. I mean, I'd say it a little differently, but certainly communication. Because if we are talking about interdisciplinarity and working with teams, the ability to communicate, not only to communicate in what you're saying, but to receive, to be a good receiver of information, and to be able to sort of strip away your biases that come from your own disciplinary perspective, and to find value in what the other person in the team is saying or persons in the team. And again, as Erin suggests, it doesn't necessarily even mean an academic community or academic, a traditional, I should say, academic team, right? You're talking to folks in the community and there's valuable information that's there. How do you receive that? And how do you take the information you have and translate that into a way in ways that are easy to grasp? I think that's very important. And again, people being able to work in team, having the kind of temperament and having the kind of just character, personality that allow them to work in groups. Because as is suggested, I mean, the problems that we are facing are so immense and they cannot be solved. I mean, physicists, we like to think that we are the top of the apex of the apex of the physical sciences, right? But the reality is there's no one perspective that is going to solve the issues related to climate change, the issues related to the pandemic. We need so many different perspectives, and we need people who are able to draw upon those perspectives, even though they may not be experts in all of them or more than one of them, but to work with other folks and come up with proper solutions.
Alice, thank you, Carlton.
I can jump in here. This is a great question. And by the way, I'd love to know what the bottom horizontal line is. So keep that in mind, Guillermo, of the I, not the T. But in terms of the competencies that sort of jumped in to my mind were critical thinking and then adventurous thinking. And I know adventurous thinking, I just made that up, but it's this idea. So the critical thinking, I was fortunate enough to be a moderator for a panel this morning, for a session this morning on race and gender equality. It's kind of how we think about that in resilient design and approaches. And, you know, for me as a university, what we really want to do is help people think differently about the world, appreciating what it is when you unpack a particular place and the racial dynamics, the gender dynamics, the age dynamics, the political histories are embedded in there. It's so important that we do this unpacking and learn to ask the questions of, well, what is happening and why is it happening this way, right? I think that's what universities are really good at. What we're getting better at, or what we need to get better at, is that adventurous thinking. And that starts to connect into recognizing diverse perspectives, being adventurous in that interdisciplinary, across disciplines, out of the box thinking, so that we're not just being critical and recognizing that things might need to change, but how do we change them? And so that's sort of that action-oriented, adventurous thinking piece that when we're thinking about educating future leaders, we need students to leave understanding those different entry points into grand challenges and issues of resilience and how we move forward as a society for more just and sustainable world.
Excellent, thank you, Alice. And I promise I will use that term at some point, and I will give you credit, adventurous thinking. Beatriz, so I want to go to you next. You hold such an important role at UNEP, and I'm wondering if you can speak to us for a few minutes about what are you and UNEP doing in general to transform your campuses, your infrastructure, your curriculum?
Sure, but first I will start giving my two pieces on this discussion of these skills. I think that the ability to lead and collaborate in a diverse environment is key for the future generation. Much has been said about communication skills, and I think that this is pretty out there already. Yesterday I was also in a panel in the EcoSoc Youth Forum about, and then it was said that no, what we have, and it was a representative of the youth institution, they said no, what we have is that the ability to communicate. So I think this is already out there. But what I question and what I think what I challenge is the ability to actually engage in a diverse environment. So, but yeah, going back to what we are doing here at UNEP. So first, I would like to call your attention to the Agenda 2030 and the Sustainable Development Goals, which is this agenda that was agreed upon by state members in 2015, in which they commit to reach 17 goals and 169 targets by 2030. And among them, we have one that is actually very close to your hearts, because you were all from universities and I am not, so it's like, which is the target, the goal of 4, and to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. And I would like to highlight specifically the target 4.7, which is by 2030, ensure that all learners acquire the knowledge and skills needed to promote sustainable development, including, among others, through education for sustainable development and sustainable lifestyles, human rights, gender equality, and to promote a culture of peace and non-violence. So it's such a big mandate that, universities have at this point, I think. And what we are doing to support this is that we see that there is the urgent need to address this, to contribute to Agenda 2030. And we have launched this initiative it's a global initiative, but it has a regional chapter for Latin America and Caribbean, which is Global Opportunities for Sustainable Development Goals. We call it Goal for SDGs, which aims to strengthen regional solutions in sustainable consumption and production, supporting governments, small and medium enterprise, and youth, with the focus to amplify youth voices and empower them to embrace sustainable lifestyles. And with this project, we are currently, we lead the Youth and Education Alliance, which is an alliance of higher education and youth networks that works with experts and institutions to support the integration of sustainability agenda in the curricula on the ground. We have this publication, the Little Book of Green Nudges, which provide a set of guidelines that summarize the evidence around which nudges work best in fostering more sustainable practices among students and staff in various categories of behavior change. So this publication provides 40 simple options to help universities develop, implement, and evaluate behavior change interventions in a variety of contexts. This year, we are supporting the regional piloting of this Little Book of Green Nudges, and we have more than 100 universities that have already submitted a commitment to integrate at least one nudge in your campuses. So I invite you all to, if you haven't done so, please get to know this Little Book of Green Nudges and send us your commitments. Finally, in the region, we work in cooperation with the Alliance of Ibero-American Networks of Universities for Sustainability and the Environment, the ARIUSA, to measure the integration of the SDGs and environmental education in universities. They have what they call an observatory. And next week, we will be launching the new phase of this University Observatory, and we will also be presenting the Little Book of Green Nudges in this webinar next week, which I would also like to invite you to join us. I think this is all that I would like to speak for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Beatriz. And you know, certainly if you get us some of those resources that you mentioned or links, we're happy to you know, provide those to the conference administrators so that they can, you know, circulate it to the attendees. That's wonderful. Erin, I'm going to give you the next question. You know, this is something you're very familiar with, and certainly all of us at the University of Miami are very familiar with ULink. But for a lot of our panelists and our audience members that are not from the University of Miami, it would be helpful for them to get to know a little bit about you know, what you're doing, your leadership role in the ULink program that you oversee, because it's such an important interdisciplinary initiative, not only across academics, but also it does involve, to some extent, community partners and outside partners. So I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit about ULink and how you believe it fosters interdisciplinary interdisciplinarity?
So thanks. So ULink was a program that was conceptualized by a colleague of mine, Susan Morgan, with lots of insight from John Bixby, who was actually my predecessor as the Vice Provost for Research and Scholarship. And the intent was to create a program to maximize interdisciplinarity across the university and with our local community. Because within our president's roadmap, one of his strategic areas of emphasis for a university moving into the next 100 years of its development was really to have a cadre of scientists, scholars, and students who approach complex perspectives with an appreciation of working across interdisciplinary boundaries. And so the way that ULink was conceptualized is that every year, our research council, which is comprised of diverse faculty across the university's 3 campuses, comes together to nominate what they believe the social challenge should be. And this year, given the timing of COVID and the death of George Floyd, we decided to organize ULink around race, anti-Black racism, and social equity more broadly. Teams are typically comprised of 5 faculty from different schools and colleges, and the strategies that they nominate not only reflect their shared scientific and scholarly expertise, but are required to engage community members in helping define how they apply that research or scholarly expertise to a problem that is often best nominated and articulated by the community experiencing it. And so we had, I think, 26 applications this year. It was the largest number of applications across ULink's history. I think partially it was the timing of when we released the call and the struggle that all of us are having, sort of navigating the complexity of COVID and this raised social consciousness around inequity in health outcomes and structural racism and violence at the hands of police and other law enforcement, particularly targeting Black Americans. We funded 9. They range in the focus of what they hope to accomplish. And one of them is actually a course, because our goal in ULink is not just to foster the research, but also to foster didactic and experiential learning opportunities where our students get exposure to the way that somebody like me, who's a biomedical researcher, works with a humanities scholar in English to really conceptualize the understanding of, let's say, how women's health has been historically represented in Caribbean literature. So in addition to the courses and to the research, we also support a number of seminars. We actually had one yesterday at the graduate school. So graduate students are involved in ULink teams intentionally because it gives them an applied opportunity to learn how to work with interdisciplinary scientists and scholars. But each of our schools and colleges host what we call like a ULink day. And the intent is for them to highlight scholars who are working in the area of focus that resonates with ULink. So they may not be ULink awardees, but it's, let's say, a musician or a musical scholar who is addressing issues of race by exploring Haitian music and how there are certain threads in current day Haitian music that trace back to the transatlantic slave trade. And it's really powerful because what it allows faculty to do is to find these common points of connection. I think we traditionally get very siloed in the work that we do, and we fail to appreciate that there might be somebody else at our institution or elsewhere who are working in a very similar way, but from an epistemology or methodology that's different than the one that we give privilege to. I really believe that when we think about our hemispheric consortium and the potential for how we work together, ULink is a beautiful model because not only can we invite interdisciplinarity, but we can invite this diverse geography around interdisciplinarity to come together so that we can really extend the impact that we might have.
Thank you, Erin. And I think those of us here certainly agree, and of course we're particularly biased, but in all seriousness, we definitely do think it's a wonderful model for encouraging interdisciplinarity and for solving important challenges, including but not limited to issues around climate and sustainability and resilience. Actually, Carlton, I want to go back because I almost forgot, and so I don't want to forget, for you to speak a little bit about some of the challenges that you have experienced in training the future workforce in this space.
That's a bit complex. I can look at it from several ways. I was trying to avoid it in some sense, but I can speak generally about the challenge at the University of the Bahamas, because as we've all articulated, universities play such a critical role in the development of countries, development of people. And essentially, as a new university, essentially a new university, but the only national university, we've really had, I think it's our biggest challenge has been around the culture, organizational culture, national culture, what it means to be a university. What does that mean for the citizens? And I think if you look at the history of the Bahamas, it wasn't until 1974 that we had a college, right? If you think about in the United States, almost immediately after states became independent, they had state colleges, right? And of course, you had private colleges before that. And so this notion of a university and the valuing of local people in generating knowledge that is useful, that is critical, is something that we are having to navigate and to sort of push the boundaries from our decision makers and funders. Internally, we're also having that kind of discussion in terms of moving from a teaching to a research. And of course, the reality that happens in many universities of the siloization that Erin speaks about. And so what we're trying to do is to make sure that the next generation of Bahamians, of young Bahamians, do not take those same kinds of approaches. I'll give you a quick example, right? It's just reflecting on our upbringing, and this may be true in the Caribbean, you'd find. Growing up, it was all about getting exams, right? A levels, O levels, and in training young people to master content, and this goes back to the I and the T, I think there was not enough emphasis on teamwork, on working together, and you still see some of that coming as new students come in. It's all about let me get my grades, and it's not unique to the Bahamas, I'm sure. And so, trying to foster into students these things that we spoke about earlier, that's so important. We spoke about the communication, but the working in teams. And so that is something that we are intentionally working on. And so if I can speak specifically about our Small Island Sustainability Program, that is one of our flagship programs, and we're going through a major review, but the idea behind that is you have students with very diverse content areas, could be in agriculture, marine sciences, ecotourism, but there are courses and spaces and seminars and internships and other kinds of team activities that sort of force them, I don't like to use the word force, but bring them together. And again, with our aspiration of extending that not only in New Providence, but to now force them to go out into the community. Some of them will go back to the communities where their parents are from or where they grew up or may call home, but may not have experienced any real time. They're doing some of these experiential work. So I think getting that teamwork and shifting the culture is something that we are constantly working on. At the same time, valuing those important things within our university history and culture that is so important, like the teaching that we put a great deal of emphasis on, but realizing that the teaching and the research, they come together and they reinforce each other. And when it comes together in the right way, so it's very powerful.
Yeah. Thank you, Carlton. Absolutely, that's a really great point that you ended up with. Alice, I'll go to you next. So how might universities embrace a global reach or international collaboration to build resiliency around the world? And I have to say that I think one of the most really interesting pieces of this symposium is how it really is bringing individuals from across the country who had probably many had never met each other, maybe some had. And so clearly, we live in an international world where global reach is so, so critical to the success. So Alice, share your wisdom in this area.
Oh no, I feel like I'm going to share my wisdom by drawing on what Beatriz and Carlton have brought to the fore just now, because I was struck by what Carlton had said around what does it mean to be a university? And I think this is what our university has been mulling over and really thinking about as we've been pulling together our new university academic plan. And now linking to what Beatriz had brought forward is we decided that our university academic plan was going to be grounded in the UN SDGs. So that we wanted our academic plan to be there to advance issues of sustainability, justice, resilience in the context of those 17 United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And I think we did this because we recognize, that these complex, wicked problems that really are illustrated through those 17 UN SDG goals, they have to have local manifestations in terms of solutions, but also sharing those globally, right? There's immense diversity across the world, but there are so many similarities. And so we recognize that what we're doing locally has such an impact on the world, broadly speaking. You can see that in terms of the climate crisis we're in. We know that what we do as individuals or organizations makes a difference. And we see this over time. It might be grand scales, but it really makes a difference. And so we've been thinking about not just how to embed a much more aspirational goal of making the world a better place, recognizing how lofty and challenging that sounds, but feeling like we want to expand so that our efforts are our goals of having positive change and positive impact in our own communities is something that we can draw from others to learn about their best practices around the world and share efforts. So to this end, we've been thrilled as a university to join the Hemispheric University Consortium, for example, which is one of the reasons I'm connecting with you today at UMiami, which is so exciting. And we have some really wonderful partnerships across the hemisphere, such as our partners at the University of Costa Rica. York happens to have an eco-campus in South Central Costa Rica, and we partner with the University of Costa Rica to learn from one another, to help students learn together through a number of academic programs we have, to bring research collaborations together, and of course to embed that in local contexts in the Brunca region of Costa Rica. And so this global reach piece to us feels like a must-do, and not just a global reach, but those global aspirations, and how do we come together to actually make those happen. And I think one last thing I'll say is that this pandemic moment, I feel it's been enormously challenging. At the same time, it's helped us make a bit of a conceptual leap. Look at us in this virtual space. Maybe not ideal. We're not necessarily together at the University of Miami on that gorgeous campus, but we are together. It's a community of practice that spreads virtually and remotely around the world. And I think that is enormously powerful because we can always be together. And sort of making that leap conceptually helps us think differently about things like global classrooms. How do we develop courses together with all of us on this panel, develop a course together that's sent online to learners around the world? I mean, those are really powerful things, and that's one of the initiatives that the Hemispheric University Consortium led through the University of Miami. So those things are really compelling, and it's the reach the distance has been lessened, and I think we should seize this moment to really make something of it.
Thank you, Alice. I can't agree more that, man. I think, COVID has required us to accelerate and to take a leap, in some ways sooner than we anticipated or differently than we would have done had it not been such a challenging year. So one more question, and I mentioned at 4:25 we have to break. The president is speaking, President Frank is speaking at 4:30. So this last question is for Myriam and/or Beatriz in the next 5 minutes. And the question is, what is the, and this has sort of been touched upon certainly, but what is the unique role that universities can play to support the achieving of sustainable development goals?
Thank you. Thank you very much for this question. And I want to react to Alice's comments and also Erin's mentioning the initiatives. And I think it's very exciting to hear all of these projects and initiatives. And I totally agree with the fact that since COVID, this is the time more than ever, now more than ever before. This is the time when universities have to join their forces. And at Universities Caribbean, we have had more opportunities and more partnerships than ever before COVID. So I must say that I totally agree with what you just said, Alice. And if I want to respond to your question, Guillermo, universities are not meant to serve themselves. This is what our president, Hilary Beckles, always says. They are meant to serve their communities. And in order to serve their communities, then they have to respond to the needs of their societies. And in the Caribbean, we have a number of development. All of the development goals are actually have practical responses in the Caribbean and manifestations, in the Caribbean. So we target those priority topics, those priority issues that we see as common issues for the region, and we engage with our leaders of universities, but also youth leaders who engage as the future leaders and entrepreneurs of the region. So I believe that the universities should definitely provide more engagement platforms for leaders to engage and find practical solutions to the challenges of the Caribbean region.
Thank you, Myriam. Beatriz, do you want to add to that?
Very quickly, 2 points. I think that first step is that universities need to ensure the right to higher education of all people in a framework of equal opportunities and non-discrimination as a priority. So we call it leave no student behind, in line with the purpose of the Agenda 2030, leave no one behind. And I agree that the pandemic brought an opportunity to review the current regulatory frameworks and policies to ensure equal opportunities for students. And the second and last point is that universities can lead by example. So they can be agents of change to integrate environmental sustainability and achieve the SDGs in their own campuses and serve as an example to their communities and society.
I think this is a great way to end. I really appreciate everyone on the panel taking the time this afternoon to be part of it. I didn't know what to expect coming in, and you all were phenomenal. And really, I actually learned, this isn't my area, but I learned quite a bit, and thank you so much. And I'm sure that everyone that's watching us also had a great experience. With that said, I actually will be reaching out to all of you on the panel because you all gave me a great idea, or what I think is a great idea. Maybe you'll think otherwise. With that said, I hope everyone stays well. I know this has been a challenging year, as was just said, and hopefully we're sort of at the beginning of the end and now seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. So stay well, everyone. Take care.